my stuff. But at the time I was doing a radio show, and just once a week for like an hour. In retrospect, I should have just started a podcast, because the radio show, it was live. And so the only people who'd call in were like truckers on the road, like on their CB radios. It was crazy because, who else had it? But it was super fun. And I'd have tons of guests, and we'd do crazy. I remember one time faking an earthquake, like the West Coast had fallen off the country into the ocean. And we played it dead straight. And later that day, the people at Sirius called me and said, yeah, don't do that again.
This is Coop's Comedy Corner. Buckle up, because it's funny as Coop's Comedy Corner.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Coop's Comedy Corner. I think this is episode 8 or 9 or 10. I don't even know people. I record a lot of these. I have like 3 different podcasts going, and I always forget. But it's really, I'm excited for the guest on my show. First of all, give a big shout out to Jimmy Corhan and a Comedy Trainwreck, which is the producers of the show, and they made the show possible because I would not know how to record on YouTube and post it and edit it. But my guest today, it's funny. He did Cooper Talk, my other podcast. He did it originally in studio in LA, and I think he did it when I moved back here. And he's been on TV. You see him on the show My Boys. He's got a podcast, YouTube show, I guess maybe I'll call it now, The Parents Lounge. He's a touring stand-up comedian when he can get out of the house, away from the kids. And it's Jamie Kaler. What's up, man?
Hey, Coop, how are you, brother? Good to see you.
Good to see you. It's been forever.
Yeah,
it's been forever. I was talking to Jimmy before the show. Okay, tell me, we're going to get into your career, but tell me the path from being in the Navy to becoming a star of a sitcom, because it's not something you hear every day.
Well, I thank you for the word star, but I feel like that is inappropriate. But I'm, of course, from a different generation where there was, I don't know if you remember this thing called humility, where people didn't like point at their heads and brag about themselves day and night, like Jake Paulitis or whatever. But I get it. That's how you monetize stuff nowadays. But yeah, I was out of New Hampshire. I wanted to go to UNH, play soccer, and do drugs, I think. And my father was like, we don't have any money for college. So if you want to go to college, you're going to go ROTC. So I went Naval Reserve Officer Training Corps. And I went to Boston University, and I was on a ROTC scholarship. And then so after I got my degree, I had to go serve. And so I said, I don't care what ship you put me on. I want to be out of San Diego. I love New Hampshire. I love the East Coast. Not a fan of cold weather. And it was the year after Top Gun came out, and I got stationed in San Diego, and I was on a ship, and I had my dress whites, and it was a pretty good time. And when people say, thank you for your service, I always go, thank you for letting me serve, because it was a wonderful time in history. But I got out.
I got to tell you real quick, though, I interrupt you about San Diego, because I lived there, and I lived there in the gas lamp when it was first building up.
Gorgeous.
And I always laughed because the movie Top Gun, they hung at Kansas City Barbecue, wherever it was, which is right near Seaport Village. And where they flew jets was out near Miramar, which is like 40 miles away. And where Tom Cruise was riding his motorcycle through the streets was shot in Oceanside. So people watching it thought, oh my God, these guys go to the bar. No one went to that bar that was in the Navy and drove 45 miles. I mean, that's what always cracked me up when I watched that movie. I'm like, you don't get it. To this day, still, I'm like, no one was playing the fucking piano in there, singing, bring back that loving feeling. It was a tourist trap, and that's all it got. They rolled from Seaport Village, where they had a drink called the JR Monster. This one bar had like this big out of a fishbowl. And yeah, so anyway, back to your story. I just had to say
you're absolutely right. And listen, movies, well, it's like remember the show 24? The guy would be in Pasadena going, I'm heading to the airport. I'll be there in 10 minutes. No, dude, it's Friday. It's 3 p.m. You might not get there on Friday. You might not be there till Sunday. So everybody, it should have been called like 72, because there's no way you could get around LA in 24 hours. I always used to laugh, but yeah, San Diego. So I lived in Pacific Beach, but my ship was stationed I was first stationed in Coronado, which was gorgeous. Silver Strand Beach.
Were you on the Connie, the USS Constitution?
No, I wasn't on the Connie. That was at North Island. I was on the Henry B. Wilson, and then I was on the USS Callahan, which is so fortuitous because the character I ended up playing on My Boys was Mike Callahan, and I used to have hats with the USS Callahan on it, and so I put that on the set, in my room that was supposed to be my character's room, I had a USS Callahan hat in the back of it. So it was fantastic. And they were both stationed at 32nd Street. I did surface warfare officer school out in Coronado. And then, you know, I did like 5 years, and then I got out, and I just wanted out. I almost stayed in. My brother was a full admiral. My dad was a pilot. I almost was going to be like a Navy guy. And then I was like, you know what, man, I don't really want to do this. So I got out and I got a job bartending. And I was always funny. I was always the funny cat. And so my friend was like, hey man, you're really funny. You should come to this improv group with me. And so I said, yeah. And as soon as the first improv class I went to, my brain exploded. And I was like, oh, because, you know, back in those days, there was no America's Got Talent. There was no American Idol. There was no The Voice. So growing up in New Hampshire, you never thought for 1 second that was a career path. Like, oh, I could go be an actor and perform and do comedy. That just wasn't a thing back then. Like, it was like even the comics and, you know, Fitzsimmons and Jeff Ross were at BU when I was there, and they were off doing stand up at like Chinese restaurants and stuff. Like, it was you know, it's not like it is now where it's like you go, hey, you do stand up, and you're like, every single person you've met has done stand up. Like the woman working at the library goes, oh, well, I do Tuesday nights up at the Laugh Factory. And you go, I'm sorry, what? And everybody now. But back then, you know, you go way back to like the 60s when Lenny Bruce was at strip clubs going up between strippers or whatever. So I fell into improv.
I started in 88 or 89, and in Philadelphia, we had 2 open mics. We had 2 clubs. Yeah. Well, Go Bananas didn't have open mic, but the Comedy Works and the Comedy Factory Outlet, we only had 25 people like on the list. That was it. And that was like a packed night. And we were like, holy shit, there's so many comics. And then when I lived in LA, I'm like, holy shit. Like, as you said, everybody's a comic or everyone's written a screenplay.
Exactly. Well, it just was a different era, and not that it's bad, but now, you know, by the time you got to be a really good comic, you'd done a lot of shows, and you had eaten a pile of shit at a bowling alley, a youth hostel where nobody spoke English. Remember the laundromat show? Did you ever do the laundromat show? You were doing
but I did the youth hostel.
The youth hostel, I was like, why is nobody laughing? And then one dude was like, nobody speaks English, man. I go, why am I here? What is happening? Do you remember Lucky Strike at the Hollywood, the bowling alley?
Yeah.
You could hear the music and the bowling, and you'd be like trying to tell jokes. It was a train wreck.
Well, it's funny. You mentioned the 3 clubs, and we talked the other day.
Yes.
And that place has been around forever. And it's always such a seedy area. Like, it's always dark. And then I don't know if you remember, do you remember the Coconut Teaser? That was
of course.
Sunset, and
Johnny Cardinale used to do that all the time up on Sunset, the Coconut Teaser. And then they'd have like, if you were a singer-songwriter, you could get up and do like 2 songs. So you'd go to some of these places like Vanilla Fudge Factory, I think might have been the first place I ever performed. And I got up, and then some woman after me read poetry. Then a dude did a song. Remember the Novel Cafe? Like, here's what the point of this whole madhouse is how different times are, because by the time we polished a stage presence, the kids today, they'll do TikTok to the point, which is, I get it. It's a wonderful place to, you know, instead of doing a show for 9 people across town, you have billions of people who can watch you. And so, but the problem is they have this amazing TikTok personality, but then they can sell out a theater, and they're not stage performers. They're 2 different skill sets. And so some of them are able to transfer what they do to go over, but some are not. They're mere TikTok celebrities who then, you know, put together a stage show the best they can to sell seats. But back then, man, by the time you finally started to do the improv or something, you had some chops.
Now you're doing comedy, and now as you're in LA, you're doing comedy. At what point do you say you also want to act? Because a lot of times, I know from we're around the same age, we probably started a little in between. It was one of those things where you're like in Philly, our concentration was doing stand-up. Like, if someone showed up to an open mic and said, "Oh, I'm doing this good at sitcom," I'd be like, "Yeah, get the fuck out of here. You know, we're comics. This is you know, we're comedians. This is
that happened to me. That verbatim happened to me, because I got into stand-up after. I was actually improv and sketch. I joined Acme when I was in San Diego, And randomly, I got a couple of weird jobs. I was doing improv. We were doing like crazy shows at the Improv or whatever. And somebody saw me, and I ended up booking a couple of shows. I went on auditions, and I booked Renegade with Lorenzo Lamas. And I did a SeaWorld commercial where I watched Shamu jump. I'm like, holding my girlfriend. And I was like, I could do this. And so I moved to LA and couldn't get arrested. And I joined Acme Comedy Theater, which was all sketch. It's like the Groundlings, where you wrote and performed sketch, but I still hadn't really done stand-up. And then at some point you go, oh, I can't really monetize sketch or improv. So you go, well, I took a few of my sketches. I kind of hobbled together a stand-up act. And then I just started hitting, I would do sketch on the weekends, and then the other nights I'd go do stand-up. And I've always kind of I've been a jack of all trades in a way, where I'll do, like, even this week I'm working on SWAT. I'm doing a guest star on SWAT. But this past weekend I was doing shows in Pennsylvania. So I kind of like juggling instead of just doing one. I think you kind of have to have a career in this town. You can't just do one thing or you're not going to make it. I'm the voice of National Lampoon's streaming service, do a voice on Loud House. We do the podcast. It's like you end up doing a million different things to and all of a sudden at the end of the year, like, I had a pretty good year. But I have friends who are just acting and waiting for the phone to ring. And you're like, that's a rough go.
When you started, you started, as you said, Renegade with Lorenzo Lamas, which I think that's shot in San Diego.
That's how I got it. I was in San Diego at the time. I was living at Pacific Beach. I did that. I did Vanishing Sun. It was all the Stu Siegel productions back in the day. And that was the deal. I had a local agent, and she would send me out a handful of things. And I booked a few, and I was like, and everyone was like, if you want to really do this, you need to go to LA. So I didn't know a soul. And I just moved to LA, and was like, got a job at a bar, and just started going on auditions.
How hard was it for you to get an agent? I got lucky in LA. I got lucky because I got my agent. When you came to that building where I recorded Cooper Talk, there was one day there was all these actors in the hall. And I'm like, I said to the receptionist, I went down to go, oh, there's an agency, RPM, it's a woman named Tiffany Atwater. And I said, okay. So I sent him an email. I said, I do a show around the corner. I want to come meet you. And they signed me. And it was like, I got lucky. I got lucky to get an agent. What was your coming up to get an agent? You're a blonde, good looking Navy guy, tall, it must have been, we both know Reed Diamond, it's like you're one of the Reed guys. Like there's that crowd of people like Patrick Fabian, Mark Valley.
I lost a few roles to both of those cats. And here's the problem. I like both of them very much. I used to see Reed at IO all the time. He's superb. Really both wonderful actors. But they're not, like, Reed's not a stand-up, neither's Patrick, I don't think. And so, and again, that's just one of my, like, if I didn't book a part, I would go book the road and do stand-up gigs. But to get an agent, I've been with every agency in town. From my first agent, I think, was Marsha Hervey Grimes. Her son was on the Wonder Years. She was super sweet. They were wonderful. Pam Grimes, wonderful people. I ended up booking a huge Bud Light commercial. Do you remember I've booked probably 250 different commercials. I was spokesperson for numerous commercials. And back in the day, you'd book a few commercials and a couple guest stars, and you had a seriously good year. You made some serious money off of just that from acting. And so I booked a huge Bud Light. The guy's getting married. He fakes a marriage to a mannequin so he can, and we go, what'd you get him? And he goes, well, I registered for Bud Light. He goes, I got him Bud Light. And everybody got him Bud Light for the wedding. And then it turns out the bride turns around, it's a mannequin. And you're like, it was a great spot. And so off of that, I ended up getting the agent I still have for commercials and voiceovers is Sutton Bartha Bernari, who I love. And then I was with Osbrink. I was with CAA for a cup of coffee, Paradigm. You go, it's like you're hot and they go, and then you're off a show and they go, we don't want, So, the truth is you end up getting your own work for the most part, just by being out there and doing stuff.
For you look at the IMDb. You were on Third Rock from the Sun, King of Queens. You were on a bunch of stuff, but then, Friends comes along.
Yeah.
And
that was a big one.
So tell me about Friends, because that was, what season was it? Because I never really watched Friends. And I just been watching them recently when they were coming on, because Joanne will watch reruns, and it's really funny. I didn't, because I was always out and doing shit. But what season was it that you were on Friends?
Honestly, I don't remember. I don't know the seasons. It's called the one with the girl from Poughkeepsie. And it was a huge deal. It was a monstrous deal. It's so funny because I did Third Rock from the Sun and I had one line. I was so nervous. I think my line was package for Scoochie or something. And I had to, John Lithgow, out of all the people I've worked with, was literally one of the handful of nicest people you've ever met. And so I feel really uncomfortable. I have one line. They do a read through before the show, and I'm like standing in the corner, and John Lithgow's like, Jamie, come over here and be in the read through. And he kind of puts me in the circle, and I finally get to my one line and I say it or whatever. And during the scene that we shoot for that, he and I both had to enter the scene. And so he and I are standing shoulder to shoulder in the dark, just outside the door on the set for like what seems like an eternity as they're shooting the scene for like 2 minutes before we enter. And I'm just standing there like sitting next to John Lithgow. And, I barely acted. I was a Navy lieutenant who was all of a sudden like, oh my God, I'm on the set. And it gets just before he enters and he leans over and he goes, you only have one line, but make it worth it. And then he entered and I started to laugh. He was like his dressing room, by the way, it was like a museum of comedy. He had Charlie Chaplin's cane framed over the door. Like you walked into his dressing room. It was like a museum. Like those are the kinds of crazy things. And then King of Queens, Kevin James couldn't have been nicer. And it was Jimmy Schubert was on that episode. Gary Valentine was on that episode. Rock Rubin was, everybody's there. And it's so crazy. And so all of a sudden I get this Friends audition and, my friends at the time, it was like, Friends. It was that season. So the week I shot, they were on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. That was the week. Right. Like the set was closed down. There was security everywhere. They were gun shy by then about speaking. And Matt Perry was probably in the throes of whatever stuff he was dealing with. They were all super cool, but they were guarded. When they spoke to each other, they held a hand over like, because I think they'd been burned by people like saying, I saw them say this. And I say, it was kind of tense, to be honest with you. It's kind of nerve wracking, but the audition was insane. There was like probably 40 guys there and we all go in and there were 2 guys in the scene and we had to read with each other. And so they would bring 2 at a time. And then they'd go, everyone stay, which they don't normally do. And then so all 40 guys are in a waiting room. And then they would come out and they'd read a list. These 20 stay. The other 20 get up and walk away. And then they bring us all in again and they repair us. It's like another hour and a half. And my sweat stains are like this, just monstrous. And I'm like, whatever. And so they all go out and then the guy comes out and he goes, all right, these 10 stay. And they cut it down again. And now there's only 10 of us. And 10 of us are like, man, we could book this thing. We're in the mix. And gets down to a handful of us. And finally, I go in with this guy, Mike DiMaggio, who ends up becoming an EP of The Amazing Race, the coolest cat. And we are the last 2 to go in together. And we read. And we go out and they make us wait. And then they come out and they go, all right, we're good. Everyone can leave. And we've been there for 4 hours. It was like the longest, most painful audition. And he and I are walking to our cars in the parking lot going, dude, I think we might have booked this thing. And it was so like the feeling, the adrenaline surge. And then I got the call like 20 minutes later on the drive home. I had to pull the car over. I was like shaking of like, oh my God, I just booked Friends. Like it was the craziest thing. It was like, The only bigger one was My Boys, like, because My Boys had 6 auditions. And after the 6th one, I'm leaving and I go, it's down to another guy and 9. We've already signed contracts of what we're going to earn. And you're like, I'm bartending that night. And this is like, it would be life-changing. And I just remember they called and I pulled over and like tears were streaming down my face of like, I can't believe I just booked that thing. Like it was the craziest feeling. And then I, of course, had the opposite feeling where I was like, I didn't book that. Like my agent's like, no, you didn't book it. You're like,
well, tell me the story. Because you've told me this story before, but I want the people to listen to it. Weren't you involved with a show with Frank Langella that Clooney was producing?
It's crazy.
And it didn't get picked up. And see, this is what people are going to. This is what Hollywood is like. Yeah. That you think you have a sure thing, George fucking Clooney. But tell me what happened with that.
Honestly, this was even earlier. This was before Friends. I was just here. I was doing improv. I was bulletproof, and I go in for a series of auditions, and it's called Kilroy. And George Clooney wrote it and exec produced it with Matt Adler. And it was about an acting class. and Frank Langella was the acting teacher. Nick Lang was the lead guy in the class, and I was going to be the redheaded like dick in the class. I was going to be the jerk in the class. And we had like numerous auditions. And my last audition, and this is after ER and everything, Clooney's already a monster. And my last audition on like the top floor of the HBO building, you know, they make you sit for like 2 hours. I'm a nervous wreck. I have to go in with Clooney and read the scene, and he reads it with us. He reads the opposite lines. And for some reason, I just, you know, some days it clicks and some days it doesn't. And that day it just clicked. And he's reading and he goes off and starts improvising, but I'm doing a ton of improv at the time. And so I improvise right along with him and it goes great. And he even at the end, he just winked at me and I was like, yeah. And I was like, Allah! And then we go to the table read and all the HBO execs are there. And Laura San Giacomo is just kind of doing the reading with everybody. I think she's married to Matt Adler at the time. And even she's like, quit your day job. You're going to be doing this for the next 7 years of your life. And I'm driving home like, oh, here we go, baby. And they cut the thing. And like a week later they call and they go, it's not going. And I go, I'm sorry, what? And they go, it's not going. And I go, so I was back bartending like 2 days later. And, you know, I shot it for a week. Todd Holland directed. He's super famous director. And they just didn't pick it up. They didn't want it. It didn't click. And I was back bartending. Yeah, I've had a few of those. I had one, oh my God, for ABC after My Boys to be like the lead guy on this show with Jenna Elfman. It was an ABC sitcom. And I'd gone to like 6 auditions. I was murdering these auditions, just like in the zone. I was coming off of My Boys. I was feeling it. And they go, you know, you're still a little nervous, but after the 6th audition, they're like, all right, man, it's only down to you and this one other guy, Chip Eston, super cool cat, super talented. They go, they're going to make a decision. And I go, all right, I feel good. I've done everything I can. It's up to them at this point. And then they call, and so I've already purged it from my brain. I'm not going to have to audition anymore. And then they call the next day and they go, hey, so they just signed Jenna Elfman. She's going to play the wife. And they want to see you read with her chemistry. But my brain is already like, I'm so over this audition. I've already auditioned so many times. And so we have to go to ABC at the top building here in the Valley. And they make me wait for like 3 hours. Jen Elfman's there. She's not really concerned with either Chip or I. She's like in her own world. And you know, she's everyone's dealing with their own stuff. But I'm like, well, what's that? I didn't want to audition again. I just didn't want to do it again. And so I go in and it just doesn't click at all. Bomb. It just bombs. I'm like flop sweating. It's a train wreck. I walk out. I go, Chip, it's all yours, my friend. And I don't think I slept for like 2 days. I think I cried on the way home. I was like in tears, just like this was over like 6 weeks. Like from the first audition to this is like a 6-week, like physical draining. I'm losing weight. I'm not sleeping because you sign a contract that says you're going to make a lot of money every week of this episode. You know, it's like Modern Family or something. These guys are making these tons of money. And then so they call and they go, yeah, you didn't get it. I go, Chip got it. And they go, no, Chip didn't get it either. Neither of you got it. And I go, what? And so it ends up, I learned a valuable lesson that it's really not up to you. Nothing's up to you. By the time she came in, neither of us had a shot. They were already like redoing the chemistry, and they just offered it to Tom Everett Scott like the next week, and he took it. And here's what's even crazier. They shoot the pilot. That doesn't get picked up. It didn't go. So I had this like epiphany about like, I'm sweating my ass, losing weight, like in tears over stuff that you have no control over. And it was a real good lesson about like, look, just go in, do the best you can. That's it, man. Do the work, do the best you can, and let the chips fall where they may. And so it was just one of those things. I talked to the producer years later and he's like, dude, he goes, I don't even know why they had that test session that day. Neither of you two had a shot. They'd already said neither of you two were getting it. And I was like, well, why'd you guys bring me in? They go, no, they kind of had to because you were. And I was like, what a waste of everyone's time. And you're like, that was the business then.
You know, you look back at your career. You were recurring. You had 5 episodes on Will and Grace. Now, well, what was that? How did that come about? Was that originally a one-off, and then it happened? Tell me about Will and Grace.
Oh my gosh. So that's another huge story. I'm actually in San Diego with Chris Hardwick. We're doing stand up the night before. Do you remember that beach bar on like Garnett? They used to do I want to say it was like a Tuesday or
Yeah,
Wednesday night
Moondoggies.
show. It was Moondoggies. Exactly
Moondoggies.
right. So we drove down, we do the show that night. We kind of tear it up a little bit. I get up in the morning, they go, "Hey, there's a last second audition for Will and Grace." I go, okay. So I go, "Chris, we gotta go." So I had to drive back from San Diego in the morning, go home, get showered and shaved, try to pull it together, go over to Warner Brothers, and then do this audition. And I didn't know the sides very well. I'm trying to memorize the thing on the ride home. They'd emailed it to me or whatever. And I go in and they're super cool, but they're like, "Do it once." And they all pause for a second and they go, and then, so I'm looking around the room like, and there's just this awkward silence for a long time. And then out of nowhere, one person goes, "Okay, thanks for coming in." And I go, "Oh, it. I thought I had it. I thought it was so close." And so I go to leave. I'm getting into my car, all like whatever. And this assistant comes running out and she's like, "Jamie, hey, can you come in and do it one more time?" And they brought me back into the room. And so I walk all the way back across the parking lot, up the stairs, go back into the room. But I'm like juiced, but I'm a little nervous. And they go, "Hey, can you do it one more time? And can you do it?" The character was based on Gary Cole from Office Space. Yeah, I'm gonna need you to come in Saturday. And so I really knew that character. And I go, "Yeah, absolutely." And we did it again, and I added just a little bit of Gary Cole. And I could see the smiles in the room, and they go, "All right, thanks for coming back." And I left, and they called like 20 minutes later, and I ended up getting. And here's what's insane. I mean, it's such an insane part. It's because I show up to shoot, and my boss in the show is played by Gene Wilder. I've only done a handful of sitcoms in my life, and I'm doing a scene opposite Gene Wilder, who's like my comedy icon. I'm like blown away. And so we do the first rehearsal. I forget to say my lines. I'm looking at Gene Wilder like 2 feet away from me, and he's saying his lines like Gene Wilder. And in the back of my head, I'm like, "It's fucking Willy Wonka." Like I'm so out of it. I'm not there. And they go, "Jamie, you got it?" I go, "Yeah, no, I got it." And I remember going into my dressing room after that rehearsal and just like staring at myself in the mirror going, "You can do this." And I was almost like, "It's just fucking Gene Wilder. Forget about it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that he's like a comedy. Silver Streak didn't happen. Blazing Saddles didn't happen. Just move on and get on with your life." And so it was a really hard week for me because I really had to concentrate because I was just like blown away that I was like, I don't know, 2 years earlier, I was like a Navy lieutenant. And then all of a sudden I was like in a scene with Gene Wilder. And so I ended up going back, and they keep bringing my character back because anytime they went to Will's law firm, they were like, "Well, bring Gary back." And each time the boss was a different boss. And so the second time I go back, it's Lily Tomlin. It's my boss. And so my scene's with Lily Tomlin. But luckily, nobody eclipses Gene Wilder. So I go, "Oh, it's Lily Tomlin. Obviously, it's Lily Tomlin, but it's not Gene Wilder." And then the third time I go back, it's Jeff Goldblum. I'm like, it was the craziest show. And Minnie Driver was on it, and Bobby Cannavale was on it. I mean, it was a veritable who's who of the most talented people. I still, to this day, I think, and Jim Burrows is a director who directed all the Cheers episodes. And I got to be honest, I learned so much about comedy, especially like 4-camera sitcoms from those guys. Their timing, if you watch back to those shows, it's like music. And James Burrows used to, as he directed, he would listen to the scene. I'd watch him on the side. He'd shut his eyes and he would just, it was like music to him. And so he'd hear Sean Hayes come up, and then Megan Mullally, and then the four of them are 4 instruments that are so fine-tuned with each other that I don't know if there's been many shows that have had as many jokes per minute as Will and Grace. I mean, it was like comedy camp. It was pretty crazy. And sometimes they would do the scene, and if it didn't get the laughs they really wanted, they would just all huddle up, and the writers would just rewrite the whole scene. And you're like, thank God I had done so much improv, because they would be like, all right, so Jamie, forget that old scene. Here's your new 2 lines. When you open the door, you come in on this line. This is the line you'll say. You'll turn to Will, and you're like, okay. And your brain is like spinning, and there's a live audience, and you're like, here we go, bang. And just that you would get lost with those people. I just really thought that they were one of the best comedic casts I'd ever seen. Like Friends was great, and they're all great. King of Queens was tight, but those 4 were like a machine gun at each other of jokes. Like the timing was so impeccable. It was pretty amazing.
Now, My Boys, you're one of the stars of it. As you said, you started crying.
I'm a series regular. I just showed up every week, but yes.
It was you. It was Gaffigan. It was Mike Bunin. Was Reed?
Reed Scott, who's now on Law and Order, and Kyle Howard. And I just saw them all. Jordana Spiro and Calais Stewart are the main cast. And yeah, all those guys were my best men at my wedding. I just talked to Bunin an hour ago. I just talked to Kyle 2 days. Like we're still tight. And it was a crazy, like I compliment the casting and the exec producers and stuff, because they cast us each because we all fit together as puzzle pieces. And it was really like, it's rare in a career you get something like that, where we all showed up early. Nobody left when they needed to. Like people hung. It was like the best 4 years of my life. It was pretty crazy.
So you get that. And now during the first season, when do you know you're getting picked up? Because there's so many stories, there's shows. So what happens? So you have this, and as you said, you sign this contract, you're going to make a lot of money. And you're like, I'm not going to bar. Finally, I'm not going to have to bartend. It's not Clooney's not involved. So this shit's getting picked up. If Clooney is involved,
well, what's funny? I never gave up my bar shift, even through the first season. That wasn't until the end, halfway through the second season. So you really never know if you're going to get a second season or third or fourth. We felt good about it, but they held and they waited, and then you finish the season and it doesn't air. It didn't air for a few months. We shot them all and then it aired, and so we felt good, but none of us were ready, and so we never knew. They'll tell you like the last second to go, like, we're picking you up. You shoot next week. Every season was like that. So you look back and you go, I did 4 seasons, but you didn't know after every season the next season was coming until just before it came. Sometimes it was like 9 months later, and you'd be like, do I have to go find a job? What's happening here? And I think most shows are like that, really, where you're just, it's a tricky biz, but it turned out to be great. But it was crazy, man. And I don't know. It was a good run, but yeah, you never feel comfortable. You never do, because you're just like, well, this might be the last season. But it kind of gave you this reckless abandon, just go have fun and tear it up, not knowing if you would ever do it again.
Now, after you have an experience like that, where everyone got there early, everyone, is having fun, it must be hard to go other auditions, other shows, because it's one of those things, because I know, like, I've talked to a lot of people who've been on shows for a long time. You get close to the crew. It's just not the cast. You get close to the grip and the AD and the PA if he's not a prick. And if and just you get close to people. So when you leave something like that, how are you mentally? Because it's an up and down business, but you're looking, it's like if someone, does a Coen Brothers movie, the writing is so amazing, and then all of a sudden they're doing like whatever movie. But so what was your mind frame when the show? Now, did you know it was ending, or did it get canceled, or did you get screwed by the network? That was it.
No, they canceled it at the time. Conan moved to TBS. They put all the advertising into that, and we had the writing on the wall, but they kept saying, no, we might do another season, and then all of us, I think we were all sad, but we were also ready to do something different. I also wasn't married. I didn't have kids at the time, so I wasn't worried about like money, like making a business. I've never been a money guy anyway, but I didn't really care. I lived in a rent-controlled apartment. I was sad I wasn't going to see my friends every day and work with them, but I would have loved another season for sure. I would have done it as long as that. I would have never left. I wouldn't have Shelley Longed it and just been like, I'm out of this place. But it is, I felt more grateful than anything that we had the 4 years we did. bought me a house. It kind of established me as a series regular on TV, and it made it easier to go get other jobs. But yeah, I mean, like I'm working SWAT tomorrow. I know one guy who's working on it, who's a really good friend. But other than that, a lot of times you just, especially as a guest star, you have to show up and be as good as everybody else, but you feel uncomfortable because you're not familiar with what's happening. You don't know their ins and outs. And I think we were all really cognizant of that when we had guest stars, because we had some amazing guest stars. Johnny Galecki played Trouty. We had, like, every week was another huge star. Jeremy Sisto had a run. We had, Joel Murray we had Martin Mull. I made out with Mimi Rogers. Christopher McDonald played Kyle's dad. Like, we had these crazy people come in as guest stars. Mary Lou Henner, like nuts, like crazy show stuff. And so we always made it really comfortable for the guest stars, because it's a hard thing. You come in for that week and you've got to get the vibe of that show and do it right. The only other show I really had that same thing was Tacoma FD. I worked those guys. I mean, have you had Heffernan and Lemmy on your show?
No, but they're
I'm going to set you up. They're going to come to your show. They're the coolest cats. And when I got to that show, they didn't even audition me. They just called and said, "Hey, we want a big Irish redheaded cop to play the chief of police. You want to do it?" And I was like, yeah, when's the audition? They go, "No audition, you shoot next week." I go, okay, which never happened.
How did they know you? How did they know you? They just knew of you.
I had done their podcast. They had done mine. And I had done some stand-up with Steve. I was just huge fans of them. And but we had met a handful of times and, toured up and were funny together. And we'd done a couple little things and stand-up shows together. And then they just threw me in it. And that's how they work, which I couldn't applaud more. And so when you got to set, everyone in the cast was family, like literal. Some of them were literal family. Like, that's the sister-in-law. That's Kevin's, brother. So you better be cool, or everyone's going to know you're a dick. And so that was another show, though. People showed up early. Gabe Hogan and Hassie Harrison and Eugene Cordero and Marcus Henderson, like the tightest group of hilariously funny people. And then Paul Soder would come on, and all the guys from Broken Lizard would be there. Like, you wouldn't want to leave. So even if your scene was over, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna hit craft services. I'm gonna come back and just hang out, because they would improvise and the scenes would run like 12 minutes long. Where you're like, none of this is usable. You'd be like, nobody cares. Everyone's having a blast, and you could see it on screen. Like, you could see the chemistry, and I just think that it really made it pop. And it was, I mean, even when that one got canceled, I was only recurring on that, but they did 4 seasons too, and that was like one of my favorite experiences as well.
Now, when My Boys ended, how did that translate to your stand-up? Did it get you more work because you were series regular, or did they sit there and say, once again, oh, it's some sitcom guy who doesn't have his chops? I mean, that's
that's what happened. I mean, so
because you were acting, so go ahead.
People would resent me. I remember doing some clubs in Boston, and some of the guys who were like local legends would be like, "I'm sorry, who are you again? How long you been doing stand-up?" Like, they would give me grief, and I go, it was kind of annoying, where they're like, "You don't have the chops." But I had done a ton of stand-up. I was a new face at Montreal. I had done Live at Gotham. I'd done the Late Late Show. I had done a lot of stand-up, and I was pretty prolific in it, and I had a pretty solid act, man. So it was frustrating to me, but I also understood it from their point of view, because when I know these guys, they're like road warriors. It's like, I don't think they get enough credit. Some of these guys, I know these guys, like, you look at Joe Coy. Joe Coy and I did New Faces together. One of the nicest dudes on the planet. He's probably been on the road 50 weeks a year for most of his life. Like, they think, oh, they're just going to they're not doing arenas because they just popped to arenas. These guys are like road warriors. So I totally understand that. I didn't love the road as much, so I would kind of cherry pick gigs here and there. I featured a handful of times. I went out with Greg Giraldo, who I just sat in awe and watched his act from the back of the room. I featured for Freddie Soto, who also passed away, who I watched his act and just murdered the room. These guys were just absolute murderers. But I do think there is a grind to you better know how to live on the road, because it's not a healthy lifestyle. It's really, I think it's really hard to live. I just went to Pennsylvania and I came home. It took me like 3 days to go like, oh, that was destructive. You know, it's the guys who do the show
So-
and go back to the room and write. Those are the guys who make it. Like Seinfeld. You know,
yeah.
I was
I mean,
always like, where's the party? Even on stage, I'd be like, where are we going after? Yeah. Dangerous.
Yeah, that's
very
like when
dangerous.
I was on the road. There would be people. The guy Tom Hertz used to, work at clubs, and then he ended up creating rules of engagement after he was writing on Spin City. But he was one of those guys that was very disciplined, and there were some acts that were very disciplined. I was the same way. It's like, yeah, I want to go out, especially when I was single on the road. I was like, oh yeah, we're the women.
Whitney Cummings. So like, there are people just writers, and I wish I was a better writer. I'm more of an act out guy. I improvise a little bit, and then I'll have enough jokes, and so it all kind of falls into place. But these guys like Gaff, when Gaffigan would do the show, he was such a prolific writer. I would watch him. He would just be like a workaholic to a way where I would just look at him and just be like, wow, dude, I wish I was more like that. Like his economy of words is so arguably one of the greatest stand-ups of all time. Like more laughs per minute than anybody on earth, I think. I don't know, but I would watch him work, and he was just so cool about it. But he was a wordsmith, and I wasn't. I fly by the seat of my pants more.
Now, you had mentioned all these great actors you've worked with, but we didn't get to an actor who I would see you because Joanne watches the reruns all the time. Monk. You were on Monk. What is that experience? Because Tony Shalhoub, I started watching that in reruns, and I was like, holy shit. There's a reason why he wins an Emmy when he was on it every year, because he was just amazing in that role. Yeah. I mean, you can't beat it. What was it like shooting Monk? Because I know you're on that one episode. Now, do you get killed? I forget. You're the bad guy.
He shoots me. Monk shoots me. Yeah. Yeah. It was really cool because I was so, not pigeonholed, but I was thought of as a comedy guy. And I always wanted to be the bad guy. I mean, who doesn't want to be the bad guy, right? And so I read from Monk. I end up booking it, and I get there. That first day, everyone I get to there goes, hey, don't ask Ted Levine about Silence of the Lambs. I go, I'm sorry, what? And they go, because Ted Levine plays the other guy, and he plays Buffalo Bill in the Silence of the Lambs. And everybody, hey, listen, just a word of warning, don't ask Ted about Silence of the Lambs. I go, oh, okay. So I end up, I don't really talk to Tony much. He's kind of off in his own world. He's in every scene. He's got a million lines. He's like some of these guys are working their asses off. And I'm sitting by Ted Levine a lot because we're in the scene together. And the whole week I'm with Ted Levine, and finally he talks to me and he goes, I heard you do stand up. And I go, yeah, I did stand-up comedy or something. He goes, yeah, I used to be in Steppenwolf. And I go, I know. Yeah, I know. Because I don't know if you know, but Ted Levine's like one of my favorite actors on the world. Like he's that role alone. The guy has like one of the greatest careers of all time. And so we start talking, and he tells me the craziest stories. He's the coolest dude. He's such a theater guy, like such a good actor, but also just hangs. And he tells me this insane story of Silence of the Lambs, where he goes, he's at the table read in New York. I don't want to say the state because I don't remember exactly, but I think it might have been Ohio. He grew up wherever he grew up. The guy who goes, they're shooting near where he grew up. And the guy who does location scouting goes, hey, we found the perfect house, the Gum house for Jamie Gum, where he's killing everybody. And they show him the picture, and it's the haunted house in the small town he grew up in. Like and he's telling me this story. He's like, and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like having the Silence of the Lambs like meltdown with Ted Levine. And I was just like just one of those magic weeks where you're like, oh my God, I'm sitting here with Ted Levine talking about Silence of the Lambs. And then they put the squibs on me. And he ends up shooting me like this because I think I'm about to kill Ted Levine. I forget how the scene goes. And then Mr. Monk's blind, and yet he still shoots me. I watch it now. It makes me cringe a little bit because I feel like I'm so terrible in it. But the squibs go up, boom, 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 and I drop like a rock. So great. Like that's the beauty of this crazy business, man. For every job you go and you don't get, all of a sudden you go, oh, that's right, I did do that one. That was such a, and it was like a 1 week.
Think about it. I mean, you've worked with some great people, and now also you get to go on the NFL on Fox. I mean, how many times have you been on there? You always play like a weatherman. Now, didn't you bust Terry's balls
Yeah.
Tell me about that, because I remember I was like,
I forget how the bit went, but at the end, it's like something about Terry Bradshaw or something. But they gave me kind of a kudos. Like, I don't see those guys. We shoot that during the week, and huge shout out to my buddies Norm and especially Bernie Kim, who was the one who brought me in. I had done Cubed with him, this crazy show years earlier while I was on My Boys, and then when he started doing the sketches on NFL and Fox, he reached out and I said, absolutely, dude. And then it turned into like a recurring thing. Well, like once or twice a year, he brings me in and I do some crazy weatherman sketch or something. And just another one of those crazy things like Robot Chicken. I met Seth Green and I was doing that Kilroy pilot and his girlfriend was on the show at the time. And he's like, hey, I'm doing this crazy animation show with action figures. Could you do a voice for me? And I go, absolutely. And so he brings me in. I go over to his house, sit in his garage for like an hour, and I do the bloopers host of like, here's more crazy bloopers. And he's like, thanks, man. Hey, if anything ever happens with this, I'll call you. And then 4 years later, I got a call. I didn't recognize the number. I pick it up and it's like, hey, this is Seth Green. Jamie, you remember me? Robot Chicken got picked up. You're in the booth next week. I was like, it's crazy, crazy stories, man.
It is crazy. I mean, how life works. And then you also had a more serious role where you were a narrator. And now you were a narrator for a series, right? It was
super fun. America Facts versus Fiction. Oh my gosh. You know, it's funny. The principal at my kid's school, that's what he always says to me. He goes, fact or fiction? Because they started using that thing in schools. And I made that with a friend of mine, Luke Ellis, who's a wonderful, he makes a lot of shows of that ilk. And honestly, one of my favorite shows I ever did. Yeah, they reached out and they said, hey, would you do this thing? And I'm on camera for the ins and outs, but mostly it's my voice. And it's like, here's what you think you know about Paul Revere's ride. Here's what the real story is. And so I found it really interesting. And it still plays. It's on Discovery Plus or something or other. America Facts versus Fiction. I just actually showed my daughters the Halloween one. She had a project at school about like the history of Halloween. And I was like, oh, I know someone who can help you with that. And so I brought it up on YouTube and showed her the America Facts versus Fiction Halloween episode. And she was like, is that you? And I go, yeah, that is me. Yeah.
Now, how do your kids react? Because, you know, I've followed your kids because we've been friends on Facebook for a long time. I've seen them grow and grow and go like all through their different stages. You know, when they were being hellions to you, you could tell you were just fucking frazzled. And, you know, now they're older and they're probably still making you go crazy because, you know, but do they know like that their dad was on TV, like a TV hit? I mean, do they have any idea? And when, at what age would you think you will share that with them going, you know, I'm a pretty big deal, kids. I mean, like, when do you tell your kids?
I am not a big deal. Trust me.
Come on. You've worked with all these people.
Shut up, Jade. I've worked a lot. But I've done enough kids shows. So I did an episode of Aaron and Aaron. My buddy Dickie Murphy made this wonderful show, Aaron and Aaron, about these two kids who are musicians, whatever. And I play this crazy donut guy who tortures this kid the whole show. Basically, he's mean to her. And so even at my kids' school, sometimes the kids will come up to me and go like, are you the donut man? I'll be like, yeah, I'm the donut. And so I'd done, you know, Shake It Up with Zendaya. I've done Austin and Ally. I did a lot of kids shows as well for Nickelodeon. And so, again, just one of those, seriously, like jack of all trades, master of absolutely none.
Well, let's talk about the jack of all trades, your podcast. Now, I remember when you used to have a radio, you did something with Sirius.
I know. I love that.
I forget what that was a show. That was just you. It was like the trailer thing.
Just me. They gave me this gear. Yeah, I was doing. Well, you know what's funny? I was doing the blue collar stuff. I had opened for all those guys when I first started stand up with Larry the Cable Guy and Foxworthy and Engvall and Ron White. I've opened for all of them on the road, and they even tried to put together a blue collar comedy, The Next Generation, and it was me, Justin McKinney, Reno Collier, and Caparulo, John Caparulo, and Engvall would introduce us, and they tried to capture the magic, but you can't recapture that magic. It's insane. So when that was going on, there was a blue collar channel on Sirius, which is still on. And a lot of my album stuff now plays on that, which is fantastic. And my buddies over there, Andy Fiore, and they all run the channel over there and play my stuff. But at the time I was doing a radio show and just once a week for like an hour. In retrospect, I should have just started a podcast. Because the radio show, you know, it was live. And so the only people who'd call in were like truckers on the road, like on their CB radios. It was crazy because, you know, who else had it? But it was super fun, and I'd have tons of guests, and we'd do crazy. I remember one time faking an earthquake, like the West Coast had fallen off the country into the ocean, and we played it dead straight. And later that day, the people at Sirius called me and said, "Yeah, don't do that again." I was like, "Okay, my bad." We played it dead straight. I had some guests, and I go, "Hey, man, what is that? Is that rumbling?" And it was like war. We played it like War of the Worlds, tried to at least, and we would like cut it. I don't know. I think and Sirius called me and was like, "Yeah, don't do that again." And I would roll. We also had this one. Oh my gosh, we did a show. We pretended we were at a shooting range in Texas where you could hunt humans, and it was with rubber bullets, and they had local college kids. And depending on whether the kid was an athlete or not was how much you had to pay to hunt the human. And we played it dead straight. And again, I think they called and were like, "Yeah, don't do that again either."
Now tell me about the Parents Lounge, because you've been doing this for a while. And I know on one of your shows, wasn't Richard Marks on one of your shows?
Sure. We've had Richard Marks, Keckner. Oh my gosh, Don the Dragon Wilson. We had all the cable guy and Foxworthy. Those guys have all done it too, and a ton of different actors and stuff I've had on. Reed came in that done it.
So what is it? What is
basically here's the premise of the Parents Lounge. And please, if you're a parent and you need, when I first was a parent, I had kids at 50. I had kids at 50 years old. I was like, oh yeah, let's try this. And then all of a sudden I was like, is this the way parenting is supposed to be? Because this is super painful. And I started talking to people and they were like, yeah, this is exactly how it's supposed to be. It is actually super painful. And so I started to deal with people who were like, didn't understand that. And so we just found humor instead of like suffering alone and thinking you're the only person going through this individual parenting nightmare. We started to realize everyone's going through the exact same thing. So my friend Jason Gowan, who he had Dadpocalypse, and I was doing one called the Dadlands, and we both were like, I did his podcast, and we clicked, and we said we should just do this as a all parenting thing. So it turned into, especially during the pandemic, we did a Thursday night Zoom where I'd have like 40, 50 guys in a Zoom. That's how I ended up running my second album. I would run it on Thursdays just in bits and pieces with the guys and make them laugh. And sometimes they'd help me like rewrite a joke or something. And it turned into this communal group of people who were like not going to, especially during the pandemic, man. I was homeschooling 2 kids. I was like 55 years old and I was homeschooling 2 kids, like ready to kill myself. I was like, I'm not going to make it, man. Drinking like 5 PM. I was like hanging on by a thread. And so it was more of a therapy session. And so we started a thing called the Parents Lounge, and we do shows every Thursday live. We call it Parental Mental Health Night. And we have different guests on, and they're usually like, some kind of celebrity guest who's a friend of mine who's also a parent. Richard Marks came on. He has 3 wonderful sons, and he talked extensively about that. And he was fantastic, man. He's such a good storyteller. If you ever get a chance to see him live, he's so wonderful. And it kind of took off that way. Even that show I just did in Pennsylvania, we were in Sarah, Pennsylvania, and we sold out this theater, 350-seat theater, 2 nights with like we brought Mindy Sterling from the Groundlings, from Austin Powers, and from the Goldbergs and iCarly, and the Grinch. She plays the Grinch's mom, Jim Carrey's mom. And so she came she has like a 30-year-old autistic son who's super funny. And we all came and we did this kind of like crazy podcast stand-up show. And it's been really rewarding in a way that has helped, I think, especially us. Honestly, I always say at the end, I go, I hope you got something out of this show. I know I did. Because every week I just have a list of grievances of like what my daughter did that week. Of like, you're not going to believe my 11-year-old daughter, like 2 weeks ago, I was losing my mind on her. And I said, you go to your room. And she went, you go to your room. And so I went to my room for like 2 hours. It was pretty great. She was right. And so I was like, yo, and it was just these little things. I took her door off the hinges just recently. That's a whole nother story. But yeah. So it
Why'd
turned
you do that? I mean, I want to hear that. Why'd you take
she kept locking the
doors off her hinges?
She kept going in her room I could hear her doing stuff, and she'd lock the door. I said, hey, stop locking the door. She's 11. She's not like 18. She's 11 years old, locking her door. And I said, if you lock this door again, I'm going to take it off the hinges. And sure enough, she locked it. And I got a screwdriver and a hammer. And I popped the hinges off and took the door. And the door's in the garage right now. And I said, you got to earn this door back.
You know, it's funny how parents are. When I was little, I still remember, and I'm the youngest, and we were sitting at our kitchen table. And I don't know what my parents were talking about, but my brother said to my mom, if you don't like the heat in the kitchen, get out. And my mom said, no, you get out. And she grabbed him by the arm and she walked him down the hall, opened the front door, put him on the stoop out there. And then like 2 minutes later, threw a suitcase out. And he just sat there crying and crying. He never thought that the suitcase was empty. It wouldn't have been such. But you know what? I knew never to talk back to my mom because I don't want to get my ass thrown out. But it's amazing that stuff like that actually works.
It does. Although I just actually wrote a joke about it because sometimes my wife will threaten things that I know she cannot follow through on. Where I'm like, "Ooh, you know, like she's obviously not gonna give the kid a suitcase and lock the door and go, you're moving, right? Like it's a good threat, but also my kids are at the point where they're like, yeah, she's not gonna do that." And so we were having a sleepover, and our friends were leaving town for the weekend, and they said, "Hey, can you watch our daughter over the weekend? Can she stay with you? Because our daughters are best friends." And we said, absolutely. So it's Saturday night. It's 9:00. Her parents are out of town. She's sleeping over our house. It's a huge fight. My wife has a meltdown. She goes, I'll bring Zoe home if you don't. And I'm looking at her like, hey, we can't, they're not in town. We cannot take her home. And so my wife is sticking by it of like, sleepover's over. Pack your stuff. You're going home. And I'm like, all I could see me is like checking into a hotel with an 11-year-old girl trying to explain to the cashier going, hey, listen, man, this isn't what you think it is. My wife threatened. And so now I have to follow through, and I'm checking into a hotel with an 11-year-old child. It's not. So yeah. So that's just the whole parental mental health night. Like you take these ridiculous things that we all do. We've all done it. And we just kind of blow it out. And it's really fun because the show's live. We do it live on StreamYard. So it goes out to YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, all these different places, and people comment. And so we'll ask questions. They can ask questions of the celebs that are on, or we have a bunch of jokesters who just write jokes and comment along, and we'll read them off. And so for any parent out there who wants to come play, come find us at the Parents Lounge on YouTube or Facebook is the main one where we can read your comments. And then you can comment along on what's going on.
Now, stand up. Any stand up coming? I mean, you had said you're not doing it as much now, or
no? I just coached 2 soccer teams, and we're starting All Stars soon. And my daughter's doing volleyball, and I pick and choose. And here's the deal: my wife has a full-time job, and she's a big corporate executive, and she travels a lot, so it's really tricky for me. But I do pick up gigs here and there when we have to coordinate it. But I'm starting to write. I have a good hunk of a new album. So that would be my 3rd album. I have 2. First one's Happy Father Days, and the second one's called Homeschooled. And it's all about my time during a pandemic of homeschooling 2 kids. And so it's funny. The beauty is as kids age, you get a new album out of it. So one's a middle schooler. And I was like, oh, I have another album called Middle School, probably coming soon. And so I've been writing a whole slew of material. So I'm just doing a bunch of local places, trying to get the act together. And then I'll tour when gigs come up here and there, but acting's kind of picking up again. And it's just one of those things of like, again, jack of all trades. Still doing I do the voice of National Lampoon's streaming service. Just all kinds of little crazy gigs going on. But yeah. And then mostly I'm Mr. Mom, to be honest with you. I'm Mr. Mom.
It was a great
movie. I just made rice and some green beans and a steak for the kids with some cucumbers and some carrots and some grapes. I'm like the master of just putting out a potpourri. I want
to move in with you. And just give me a little whiskey on the side, and I'll be like, "All right, baby,
I got some Gaffigan's Father Time bourbon he sent me." You know, it's funny. My birthday was in September, and I'm still that guy where I go, all anybody ever gives me is bourbon. I have like 9 bottles of like the nicest bourbon. But here's the deal: I don't know if I'll drink this in my lifetime. It'll kill me. I can't drink like I used to, man. I don't know about you. It's like I used to tear it up, and now I'm like, I have like 2 glasses of wine. I'm like hung for a week.
One final question. Looking back, you've had, I just said you're a jack of all trades, but you've been on TV shows. You've worked with not just stars like legends. I mean, you mentioned them, Lithgow. you can put Schlubnut, Wild, or Tomlin. What makes you most proud about your career?
That's a good question, actually. I guess the fact that it's still going on sometimes, I'm pretty amazed. I mean, My Boys was definitely the peak of it. That was just the greatest 4 years of. I would shoot the season, and then because I was on the show, I could headline. I would shoot out for like a few weeks of doing the Comedy Connection in Boston, Comedy Works in Denver. I'd go to Zanies in Chicago and Nashville and headline clubs, and then come back into town and go back to My Boys. And I think the last couple of years, with the strike and the pandemic, I was doing American Housewife during the pandemic, and I did Tacoma FD and then a bunch of commercials. But I do think it's starting to come back now. I think there was just too much content. And also, I was a middle-aged white guy. I was kind of falling out of fashion a little bit. And so I kind of veered into other stuff, but I think the acting's starting to take off again a bit. And then, it's just another jumping off to do another stand-up or something. But I think the proudest thing is that I just am still doing it, I guess. I don't know. some weeks I'm like, hey, is anybody hiring?
Exactly. Jamie, he does a very good weatherman. I've seen him.
Well, dude, I got to be honest with you. When you called to ask, I was like, yes, of course, I'd love to be on the show. And I feel that way about you and your show because I know the work ethic that you have and what you put into it. And the fact that you have built all these different podcasts and put this whole kind of brand together. And basically this whole corporation of Steve Cooper, I'm impressed with that, I think, because the amount of work I know you put into this thing and everything, it just is, I'm honored to be a part of it.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate it. Now, how can people find all your stuff, Jamie? How can they want to see the Parents Lounge? Your parents, you got to watch it.
I think if you just Google the Parents Lounge, it should come up. If you Google Jamie Kaler, it should come up. If you on Instagram and TikTok and whatever else, I'm just at Jamie Kaler. I try not to. I'm on social media when I feel funny, I guess, but I'm not like 3 times a day. I won't harass you with posts all day long. Know that. But I like being in touch somewhat. But I do feel like I'm of the older generation of like. Yeah, I don't think you need to know that I had a blueberry pancake for breakfast.
But I do that. I do pictures of my food because I always make those cheap meals I make. And I do album reviews and I do really stupid
By the way, the album reviews, I think that's how you brought me back on this next time, because I would see all your album reviews and just read them and go, yes. Because you did them on my first album was Bad Out of Hell, Meatloaf, Billy Joel the Stranger, and Kansas Leftoverture, I think, were the first 3 I bought.
Point of no return. I did Point of no return.
Point of no return. And I bought them at the Kmart in Hooksett, New Hampshire. I had just got a record player. I was like, I don't know, 14 years old or something. And those were so when I read your thing, it took me back in time. And honestly, to us, I do a joke about it. It's like I grew up without a cell phone. When I was a kid, if you went to a concert and you lost your friends, you made new friends. That's how that show went. And I still feel that way. And I try to tell my kids that about, if I had one lesson for them, I'm always be present, be in the moment. And I think people are not in the moment anymore. They're so dispersed trying to connect with people around the world instead of connecting with the person sitting next to them. And so I try to preach that to my kids. And sometimes when I see your album reviews, it brings me back to that time of like, I just remember playing it beginning to end, the whole album. And it's like a lost art. It just doesn't happen anymore.
Well, today I just posted U2 Ah Chung Baby. So that was
one of my favorite albums. I can tell you the tour, and I was in San Diego and I was living in Pacific Beach when it came out. And I can almost list the songs. I played it nonstop for, I'm going to say like 6 months. Yeah.
See that? Well, there you go. So people, follow me. People, go follow me, Steve Cooper on Facebook. First of all, go to see Comedy Trainwreck. Jimmy Corhan's put a great crew of acts. The other great shows, Corey Alexander's got a show. John Kensel and the Wid have a show. Coleman Green. There's a bunch of stuff on there. Also, if you go to YouTube, you can also look up the Coop Tank. The Coop Tank is my weekly roundtable of business people from the New Jersey, Philadelphia area. We talk about their goals, their objectives, what they do. Cooper Talk, it's always up there. I just said comedy legend Alan Zweibel on. There's 1,027 episodes up there, coopertalk.net. And yeah, every week, check this out. Once a month, the next show at the Soundplex Studios, Tuesday the 26th, we have me and Jay Black playing Soundplex Studio. It's the hippest venue in the area. It's a great show. So come on out. Get in touch with me, the Coop Tank at yahoo.com. You can reach out to me. And that's about it. I want to thank Jamie. I want to thank Jimmy. And everyone, keep watching and keep listening. And I'm introducing a new sponsor next week. So have a good night.
Coop's Comment Corner.